Hello, I'm MC, and today I've got for you a list of my top 10 Unison League monsters. Now a few things to note before I get into this. Firstly, this is a very debatable subject, and you may find some monsters to be better than others for different reasons. If this is the case, I'd like to hear what your top 10 monster list is in the comments. Secondly, there will be a top 10 list for monsters in quests and a separate top 10 list for monsters in PvP. This is because a lot of monsters' usefulness will vary drastically based on which scenario you're in. Thirdly, I will not be including collaboration event monsters, since they're no longer obtainable, and most likely never again will be. And finally, I will not be including multiple versions of the same monster. Otherwise, this list would be full of Athenas and Valkyries, and that's boring. Now let's get started. At number 10 for the questing monsters, we have Fiine Celestial Melody. I don't think there's an official pronunciation for this one's name, so say it as you will. Her skill is a fairly strong heal, and removal of both debuffs and status ailments, which is fairly unique. Most monsters with these types of skills will only remove one or the other. She's also a neutral monster, and one of, if not the best monster for getting haste with. For number 9, we have Emilia, Hallowitch. Emilia has a good heal, buffs your allies by 20%, and debuffs your enemies by 40%, making her versatile. Since she both buffs and debuffs, this not only causes a total of a 60% stat difference, but it acts like a sort of insurance. If the enemy balances you, they're still debuffed, and if the enemy removes debuffs from themselves, you're still buffed. At number 8 is Yukino, Heavenly Beauty. Yukino, and I'm talking about the light one, not the mediocre water Yukino, recovers 22 cost instantly, removes status ailments, grants a shield that will completely block one attack, and gives 5% regen. The shield can save you from a high damage boss attack. Status ailment removal is always nice. And who doesn't love instant cost? Oh, and there's regen that too. A very versatile monster indeed. For number 7, Ares Celestial Goddess. Ares increases attack and defense by 50%, increases cost recovery speed, increases unison gauge gains by 3, and gives elevate to only yourself. Now the defense buff is nice. The attack buff is only going to really help out soldiers and lancers, and half help archers. But for those classes, 50% attack increase is pretty nice. Elevate is an unusual buff that increases the likelihood of your procs activating, but I think the real star of the show here is that she's basically a pocket haste. She grants a haste-like buff that doesn't require the cooperation of your teammates. It's nice to not have to rely on your most likely uncooperative public lobby teammates who might not have even brought a neutral monster in the first place. Number 6 is God Aizen. There's not really much to say about this one. He deals damage and grants 2 layers of a shield that will completely negate damage. This can really save your life with bosses, especially if they have heavy-hitting attacks. At number 5, Aqua Valkyrie. Aqua Valkyrie is pretty much the Valkyrie of choice. She gives a 40% buff to all of your stats, like all the other Valkyries do, removes status ailments, and heals 15% of your max health. She's an all-around good monster that can top off your health and get rid of those status ailments, while buffing all of your stats by a large amount. I find Aqua Valkyrie to be the best of the Valkyries, since she has 2 extra effects with the buffs, as opposed to the other Valkyries which only have 1. Number 4, Snow White Ice Mirror. Snow White buffs all stats by 40% and grants a 30% reflect barrier, deals a fairly large amount of damage, and increases unison gains by 2. This monster is just crazy good. She's a combination between a Valkyrie and Amaterasu at the same time, while also boosting your unison gains so you can get her and your teammates' monsters out again even faster. For number 3, I've chosen Athena, Water of Grace. Water Athena grants a 30% damage reduction, instant 20 cost, and of course has the signature Athena skill of reducing ability cooldown times by 28%. Water Athena's combination of cost granting and cooldown reduction is fantastic. She pairs well with a neutral unison, giving cooldown reduction with the haste cost recovery boost, and some instant cost lets you attack relentlessly. The 30% damage reduction will also make you a lot more survivable against hard-hitting bosses. I've chosen Water Athena over the others because I highly value survivability when questing, and instant cost is great. Number 2 is Kagutsuchi, Flame God, also known as KFC. Kagutsuchi for a very long time was simply the best monster for questing. He deals damage, but the beauty of Kagutsuchi is all in his ability to grant ward. Ward essentially does this. If an attack would kill you, it will instead leave you with 1 HP. It will continue to do this for the duration of the ward. This is great in quests because generally speaking, boss monsters that may kill you don't attack very fast. This gives you time to either regenerate health while you have a regeneration buff, or for your cleric to heal you so you can survive another hit. So what could beat nigh invincibility? Well... Number 1. Mary, Twilight Princess. Mary is what happened when the A-Team developers got really high and thought, hey, you know what we should do? Make a direct upgrade to the best monster in the game that already makes you almost invincible. Yes, Mary grants ward like Kagutsuchi, but she also grants a 20% buff to all stats, deals damage 3 to 6 times with a chance to miss, and gives only you a 10% lifesteal effect. Just wow. Now you can be immortal, get buffs, and heal yourself with your attacks at the same time. That is, if you're lucky enough to find Mary. And that's it for the top 10 questing monsters. Now let's get into the top 10 monsters for PvP. Number 10. Mary, Twilight Princess. Yes, that's right. This is how different the applications of monsters are in PvP. The number 1 monster in questing only gets number 10 in PvP. Why? Well, this is because ward simply doesn't have the same impact in PvP as it does in quests. In PvP, players are very likely to get attacked repeatedly by multiple players, and although ward might cause the enemy to have to hit you one extra time, multi-hit attacks really work around this. Mary is still very powerful though, with her buffs, lifesteal, and ward to an extent, just not overpowered. At number 9 is Emilia, Hallowitch. Emilia is just as useful, if not more useful in PvP, as she is in quests. Her versatile buff/debuff will give you some insurance if the enemy uses balancing or purifying light, as you'll still have the other one. Healing can also save you sometimes. For number 8, Aqua Valkyrie. Aqua Valkyrie again grants 40% buffs to all stats, removes status ailments, and heals 15% of your max health. Status ailments can be particularly dangerous in PvP, so it's good to have an ailment-removing monster, and as usual, a 40% buff to all stats and a little bit of healing is great. At number 7, Ares, Celestial Goddess. I feel like Ares really shines in PvP, where doing neutral unisons can be very dangerous, since the enemy team may counter unison and wipe you out with a damaging unison attack before you can even make use of your haste buff. Ares is the solution. You can have your haste in PvP, along with a large attack and defense buff, and elevation for yourself. Number 6 is Snow White, Ice Mirror. Snow White is basically the same in PvP as she is in questing. Powerful buffs, and increased unison gains, which are especially useful in PvP, where unison attacks have a large impact. For number 5, Kirin, the Sacred Beast. Kirin grants a 40% increase to critical hit damage, and deals damage 3 times with a chance to miss. Kirin's critical damage buff allows your archers, and really anyone with Fatal Testament or Fatal Psalm, to do ludicrous amounts of damage. This is mostly noticeable during a crystal assault and guild battles, where you're free to bring out your glass cannons and deals mass amounts of damage without worrying about defending yourself. I'm also going to give an honorable mention to Shina Tobe, since she does a fairly similar thing, but instead of damage she heals and removes debuffs. However, she increases critical hit chance by 40%, not critical hit damage, which is not nearly as devastating, and almost unnecessary with the high proc rate of Fatal Testament and Fatal Psalm. At number 4 is Athena, Wind of Grace. Wind Athena beats Water Athena at PvP in my opinion, because her buff is, rather than a 30% damage reduction and instant cost, a 30% buff to both critical hit rate and critical hit damage. She of course also gives the signature Athena 28% ability cooldown reduction. Critical hit rate combined with critical hit damage just makes your crazy damage more consistent. Also, Athena's cooldown reduction will let you dish out your devastating attacks even faster. That's why I chose Wind Athena over Kirin for critical buffs. Number 3 is Indra, Shangdi God. This is where we get into the monsters with Prohibit Unison, the most overpowered thing to ever exist in history. Indra deals damage, and has a 60% chance to paralyze and Prohibit Unison. Although the paralysis can be annoying, the real threat here is Prohibit Unison. If you've played in Colosseum, you probably know how bad it is. You can be just about to get a win for your team with a well-done cooperative unison attack, and then one guy uses a Prohibit Unison monster, and suddenly you're screwed. Prohibit Unison will stop you from being able to do a unison attack. If a unison battle has already started, and you're unison blocked, your unison gauge will still be used up, but your unison attack won't activate, likely causing your team's unison attack to be much weaker or even fail. Number 2 is going to be Sacred Bloom Flora, Another Prohibit Unison monster. Sacred Bloom Flora is overpowered for the same reason as Indra, but I feel she has a little bit better of an additional effect. Sacred Bloom Flora also deals damage, and if Prohibit Unison is inflicted, your team will also get a 20% buff to attack and magic attack. Finally, number 1. Merlyn, Shadow Oracle. Can you guess what this monster does? I bet this will surprise you. Merlyn can prohibit Unison. As if that wasn't enough, Merlyn also debuffs all of the enemy's stats by 40% and deals damage 3 times with a chance to miss. Merlyn is the stuff of nightmares, as if you weren't screwed enough by a Prohibit Unison. She also gives you a lovely, terrible debuff. If you use Merlyn in Colosseum, I want you to know that you're literally Hitler. But I don't blame you, I'd use her too if I had one. That's it for this video. Tell me in the comments if you have any of the monsters featured in this list. I'm curious to see who the lucky ones are. The only one I happen to have is Athena, Water of Grace. Well, see you next time.